This is A News. I'm Bakhtiar Sonova, and let's go through the main headlines. Israeli strikes in southern Lebanon kill at least 14 as the United Nations warns of rising shelter violence in the occupied territories. Iran tightens control over Strait of Hormuz shipping as tensions with Washington continue. And World Urban Forum 13 highlights Africa's affordable housing push as governments, investors and institutions seek coordinated action. Lebanese officials say at least 14 people were killed in Israeli airstrikes on southern Lebanon this week as mourners gathered on Thursday to bury victims of one of the deadliest recent attacks. United Nations is also reporting a sharp rise in shelter violence in the occupied territories.
Tensions remained high after Lebanese health officials reported 14 people were killed on Tuesday in Israeli airstrikes in southern Lebanon, with a health center also destroyed in Mashuk. The health ministry said the dead in Deir Kanun and Nahar included 4 children and 3 women. On Thursday, mourners gathered to bury the victims of what was described as the deadliest single bombing raid in Lebanon in recent weeks. Dozens attended funerals in the southern town as rescue workers continued searching through the rubble.
We heard about the airstrike and immediately began working to evacuate the wounded and the martyrs. Today, we came to continue searching for the missing. There are 2 or 3 people still missing. The casualties here are 5 children and 3 women. There are many body parts, and their families will identify them through DNA testing.
Following attack, Israel's military said that it had targeted more than 25 sites of Hezbollah infrastructure in southern Lebanon. The attacks came despite a 45-day ceasefire extension announced by the US State Department on May 16th, worsening the humanitarian crisis amid rising casualties and displacement. Fighting has continued despite a US-brokered ceasefire, with each side accusing the other of truce violations. The United Nations also said on Thursday that Israeli settlers carried out at least 49 attacks between May 12th and May 18th.
In just 1 week, between the 12th and the 18th of May, OCHA documented at least 49 attacks by Israeli settlers that caused casualties or damage, including a rise in arson attacks against homes, farmland, vehicles, and a mosque. With this, over 870 settler attacks across more than 220 communities have caused casualties or property damage this year alone.
The ongoing war between Israel and Lebanese armed group Hezbollah is expected to shrink Lebanon's economy by at least 7% this year and could cost the country an estimated $20 billion. According to the Lebanese Health Ministry, more than 3,070 people have been killed in Israeli strikes on Lebanon since March 2nd, when Hezbollah fired on Israel, triggering a new war.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz is under serious threat as tensions in the region continue to disrupt one of the world's most important shipping routes.
The freedom of navigation, and this is what is at stake here. The Strait of Hormuz is at this moment choked off, and the free movement of navigation is seriously under threat here. So, of course, this is an interest also for all allies, not for NATO maybe as an alliance, but clearly wherever we can help, we will be there.
Iran says it's tightening control over shipping through a key maritime corridor as tensions with Washington continue after the recent conflict. Turaj Shiralilo has more.
I'm reporting from the Iranian waters at the Strait of Hormuz, connecting the Persian Gulf and the Sea of Oman. The strategic waterway through which a major share of world's oil and gas, as well as critical petrochemicals, is transited, has turned to a hot point of contention between Tehran and Washington in the wake of the Israel-US war with Iran. While the US has imposed maritime blockade over Iran's southern ports, Iran has been retaliating by defying the move and clamping down its own control over the waterway. In the latest development in the post-war standoff between Iran and US, Iran's Revolutionary Guards announced on Thursday that it allowed 31 commercial vessels to pass through the strait. Iran has also been charging the vessels sailing through the narrow corridor with safe navigation escorting poles. Also earlier this week, Iranian authorities announced that they have increased the geographical zone under their control on both sides of the Strait of Hormuz. The extension brings under Iran's grip the oil exporting terminals of the regional countries which were not under Iranian Navy's monitoring. Kura Shiralilu from the Strait of Hormuz, Foreign News.
The United States is increasing its military presence in Poland despite earlier signals of troop reductions in Europe. The announcement comes amid ongoing discussions within NATO over regional security and defense spending.
US President Donald Trump has announced that the United States will send an additional 5,000 troops to Poland, days after the Pentagon delayed a previously planned troop deployment to the country. In a post on Truth Social on Thursday, Trump said the decision followed the election of Polish President Karol Nawrocki and highlighted the relationship between the two leaders. Responding on X, Nawrocki thanked Trump for his support and described the Polish-American alliance as a key pillar of security for both Poland and Europe. The announcement comes as the Trump administration reviews US troop deployments in Europe under its America First policy. Ahead of the NATO meeting in Sweden, NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte welcomed the troop announcement while stressing that European allies are taking greater responsibility for their own defence.
Well, of course, I welcome the announcement. Our military commanders are working through all the details, but of course I welcome it. But let's be clear, the trajectory we are on, which is a stronger Europe and a stronger NATO, making sure we will, over time, step by step, be less reliant on one ally only, as we have been for so long, which is the United States.
Earlier this month, the Pentagon announced plans to cut the number of US Army Brigade combat teams in Europe from 4 to 3, raising concerns about America's long-term military presence in the region. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth later said the delay in the Poland deployment was temporary and stressed that Washington remains committed to a strong presence there. It is still unclear whether the additional troops announced by Trump are tied to the delayed deployment or will come from other bases in Europe, including Germany, where the US plans to withdraw 5,000 troops. The move comes amid NATO debates over defense spending, with Trump urging European allies to do more for regional security. Poland, one of NATO's top defence spenders, currently hosts about 10,000 US troops as the war in Ukraine continues.
Now we examine a dangerous new phase in the Russia-Ukraine war. Ukraine says it has carried out major strikes on Russian military targets in occupied territories, while Moscow and Minsk are conducting large-scale nuclear exercises involving ballistic and hypersonic missiles. At the same time, tensions are rising across the Baltic region following drone incursions and electronic warfare incidents, prompting NATO alerts and the new U.S. decision to deploy 5,000 additional troops to Poland. The developments are fueling fears of a broader regional confrontation extending far beyond Ukraine. Joining us to discuss these rapidly evolving dynamics is John Kavulik, senior editor at Issue Insight, who speaks to us from New York. Mr. Kavulik, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Mr. Kavulik, how significant are Ukraine's latest strikes on Russian military infrastructure in occupied territories? And do these attacks indicate a shift in Ukraine's battlefield strategy toward deeper asymmetric warfare?
They are significant, and they do reflect a continuing change in how Ukraine is conducting the war. For 4 of the 5 years, Ukraine has been constrained, first by the countries that provided them with military equipment, where those countries said, you can deploy the equipment, you can use the equipment, you can use the missiles and the rockets and the drones and the aircraft and the tanks, but only in the territory of Ukraine that Russia controls. And slowly that border has changed, where then the Allies said, okay, you can start attacking into Russia, but still we want to constrain you. So what the Ukrainians have done said, okay, well, in order to get around that, we need to use product that we've developed, that we've manufactured, and that we control. And that's what they've started to do, which has brought the war closer to home for many Russians. I spend a good amount of time in Kursk and Belgorod, which are the two cities closest to the Ukrainian border, the two Russian cities. And the Ukrainians continue to hit those cities. And now they're hitting areas 1,000, 2,000 kilometers away from their own border, which is unnerving the Russians, and it's causing challenges for President Putin to basically keep the narrative, which is this is a special military operation. It's no big deal. We've got it under control, and Ukraine's launching drones and hitting airports around Moscow.
Mr. Kavulik, Russia and Belarus have conducted some of their largest nuclear exercises in years. What message is Moscow trying to send, and how concerned should NATO be about the transfer of nuclear munitions to Belarus?
I don't think that anyone needs to be too concerned about it, but the component here that is intriguing is President Lukashenko and how he is reimagining, restructuring his relationship with Russia, with the US, with the EU, and with Ukraine. This week, he came out and said, I would be interested in and open to meeting President Zelensky, whether it's in Belarus or whether it's in Ukraine. And so, it's interesting to see how he's balancing the dynamic of the incredible economic, commercial, financial intertwinement with Russia for Belarus, a military connectivity that's really not going anywhere. But on the 24th of February 2022, Russian troops went from Belarus toward Kiev. And that was one of the most horrific moments during the war because those troops did a lot of damage and they killed and murdered and assaulted a lot of people, men, women, and children. And so now you have Lukashenko trying to reconnect with the United States specifically. The U.S. has lessened some sanctions, enabled them to get their Belavia aircraft back, as open doors for fertilizer sales. But the problem is the European Union has not. So that means Poland and Latvia, where Belarus would move their product westward into ports, unavailable. Ukraine's unavailable. So they have to move them through Russia, and it's very expensive, and same with their other products. So, Lukashenko is trying to show everyone that he's open, to show that he's looking for opportunities. I do hope that President Zelensky calls if it's a bluff, I hope he calls it. And he said, great, come to the border within Ukraine and we'll sit down and talk.
Mr. Kavulik, finally, the Baltic states are facing drone incursions and electronic warfare disruptions. Are we witnessing the opening of a new hybrid front in Europe?
It's a combination of the Russians making deliberate decisions in terms of where it targets in Ukraine and the potential of those drones getting misdirected either through electronic jamming or deliberately. The Russians are not, going to start picking a fight with Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, and Poland. But the technology is advancing so quickly with the use of drones, and then with the electronics, artificial intelligence, in controlling them and misdirecting them and redirecting them, that they're going to be more and more of both the unintentional and the intentional. And in reality, these drones thus far that are going into, in this case, NATO member countries as well as EU member countries, they haven't, since early on in the war, when a Ukrainian drone or rocket did kill some people in, I think it was in Poland. But we don't have a lot of death and destruction. We just have they're flying over, and it's unnerving people. So I don't think that it's a complete realignment of what we're seeing, but optically and performatively, it's something that is covered, it's talked about, and there's also political constituency, which some governments will say this is why we need to spend more on defense, and others will say this is why we need to stop the war. So you're going to have these balances of interests.
John Kabulik, thank you very much for joining us and sharing your insights. We truly appreciate your time and expertise. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you. Egypt says a major new energy discovery in the western desert marks the biggest find there in 15 years. Officials say the reserves include significant volumes of gas and oil near existing infrastructure. Egypt's Ministry of Petroleum says Agiba Petroleum, a joint venture between the Egyptian General Petroleum Corporation and Italy's Eni, made a find through the Bastan South 1X exploratory well. Initial estimates put reserves at 330 billion cubic feet of gas and 10 million barrels of condensate and crude oil. The ministry says the discovery is located near existing facilities and infrastructure, allowing rapid connection to production. Trade ministers from Asia-Pacific economies are meeting in Suzhou, China, for APEC talks focused on boosting cooperation and addressing global economic challenges. Officials from 21 member economies, including the United States, Japan and Taiwan, are discussing trade imbalances, supply chain stability and wider economic uncertainty. The agenda also includes digital trade, artificial intelligence and sustainable development. The meeting comes as APEC members navigate ongoing global economic tensions and shifting trade dynamics. Staying with China, the country has raised fuel prices once again this year, with the increases taking effect today. The hike comes as the war in Iran continues to rattle global oil markets. Mahnur Maktoum has more from Beijing.
China's state planner, the National Development and Reform Commission, has raised retail prices for gasoline and diesel with effect from May 22nd, the latest in a series of hikes since the Iran war sent oil prices surging. Gasoline prices will rise by around $10 per metric ton, with diesel close behind. Because China imports more than 70% of its oil, instability in the Middle East feeds quickly into domestic prices. And the impact is already showing, as Chinese gasoline demand has been falling since the Iran war upended global oil markets and is now on track to decline by as much as 5.5% this year, what would be the second steepest drop on record. Notably, back in April, Beijing actually capped a planned fuel price increase to cushion consumers from the full force of global volatility, a sign that authorities are trying to manage the economic fallout very carefully. Today's hike suggests that cushion has limits. Analysts warn that the increase will push up transportation and manufacturing costs at a time when China's economy is already dealing with softer consumer demand and weaker than expected industrial output. Manu Maktoum, A-News, Beijing.
Now let's take a look at the key stories shaping the region. Azerbaijan and Georgia have signed major new agreements covering gas, electricity, oil transit and rail links this week. Tbilisi says the deals are critical for energy security and regional connectivity. Nini Nikolashvili reports from Tbilisi.
Agreements signed with Azerbaijan are of fundamental importance to Georgia, Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhti said in an interview with local media. Speaking upon his return from Baku, Kobakhti described the deals as landmark agreements, saying that the negotiations were conducted not as a standard process between two governments, but as a dialogue between friends. The centerpiece of the package is a 20-year extension of the natural gas supply agreement originally signed in 2003, which Kobakhti described as critical for Georgia's energy security. The deal guarantees the gas volumes Georgia needs and maintains the transit framework under the South Caucasus pipeline project. Alongside the gas agreement, the two countries also signed a 20-year intergovernmental agreement on electricity supply and transit, covering both import and cross-border electricity transmission arrangements. One of the most significant developments concerns the Baku-Tbilisi-Supsa pipeline, which has remained idle for the past 3 years. Under a newly signed operational agreement, the pipeline, which remains Georgian property, will resume transporting oil from Central Asia to European markets. Officials say that the move could generate tens of millions of dollars in annual transit revenue for Georgia. On the transport front, the Baku-Tbilisi Ice Railway is expected to resume full operations shortly, with Georgian Railways assuming operational responsibilities through a joint venture with Azerbaijan. In addition, daily passenger train services between Tbilisi and Baku will resume on May 26 after a 6-year suspension. The agreements were signed on the sidelines of the World Urban Forum, which has brought together leaders from across the globe. Strategically located at the crossroads between the Caspian and Black Seas, Georgia plays a key role in regional connectivity. The latest agreements further strengthen the strategic partnership between Georgia and Azerbaijan across the energy, transit, and transportation sectors. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A-News.
Kazakhstan and Kenya are looking to deepen economic ties, with Astana proposing a new trade route linking the Middle Corridor to East Africa. During a state visit to Kazakhstan, Kenyan President William Ruto and President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev discussed transport, trade and investment, signing 10 cooperation agreements. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzyna reports.
Kazakhstan is seeking closer economic links with Africa. During the state visit of Kenyan President William Ruto to Astana, President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev proposed connecting the Middle Corridor with East Africa through Kenya's major ports. The plan would link the Trans-Caspian International Transport Route with the ports of Mombasa Port and Port of Lamu, two of East Africa's main logistics hubs. Mombasa alone serves as a key regional gateway connecting trade routes across much of East and Central Africa, including several landlocked countries. For Kazakhstan, this could open new export routes and wider access to African markets. For Kenya, it strengthens its role as a gateway to the East African community, a regional market of around 300 million people. Kazakhstan already handles about 85% of overland cargo moving between China and Europe. Now Astana wants to connect that transit network with Africa's maritime routes, while also relying on the broader infrastructure potential of China's Belt and Road Initiative. Trade was high on the agenda. Bilateral trade turnover exceeded $52 million last year and continues to grow steadily. Kazakhstan is seeking to increase grain exports, while Kenya wants to expand shipments of tea, coffee and flowers. Officials also discussed the idea of a trade hub in Astana for Kenyan goods. Cargo air routes and the long-term possibility of direct flights between Astana and Nairobi were also discussed as a way to support business and trade. The visit ended with the signing of 10 cooperation agreements as both sides seek to deepen economic ties between Central Asia and Africa. Fariza Kalimurzyna, Almaty, A-News.
Saudi Arabia is stepping up security and crowd management ahead of Hajj, with around 1.5 million pilgrims expected in Mecca. This year's pilgrimage comes amid heightened regional tensions, but officials say preparations are in place.
Ahead of the annual Hajj pilgrimage, Saudi Arabia is preparing a range of measures to manage the influx of millions of worshippers. The Hajj is a once-a-year event that draws millions of Muslims to Mecca in Saudi Arabia to perform religious rituals that every able Muslim is expected to undertake at least once in their lifetime. This year marks the first time Saudi Arabia has proceeded with the annual pilgrimage, while also facing a period of heightened regional tensions, including a war that has seen direct strikes on Saudi territory. On Thursday, Saudi security forces demonstrated their readiness for the large-scale gathering in a display in Mecca. Personnel marched in formation during a parade as pilgrims from around the world continue to arrive in the holy city for the pilgrimage.
Everything felt completely normal, no different from any other year. In fact, this year the organization was even better, and the procedures were much smoother, with easier movement overall.
This year's pilgrimage will take place between May 25th and May 29th, with around 1.5 million pilgrims expected to travel to Saudi Arabia.
After a short break, we head to the venue of the 13th World Urban Forum, one of the largest international platforms dedicated to sustainable cities and urban development, taking place in Baku, Azerbaijan, with our Katie Wilson.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Thanks Bakhtiar, and welcome back to A News. We're joining you from the World Urban Forum, where the Africa Affordable Housing Compact brought together governments, investors, financial institutions and international organisations in a coordinated effort to address Africa's deepening housing crisis. Participants looked at new financing models and partnership structures to help close a projected $650 billion funding gap in the sector. Experts presented new ideas for sustainable urban development and better housing policies. The initiative highlighted Africa's affordable housing sector as a growing opportunity for global investors, stressing the need for stronger partnerships.
Well, I think housing is a major issue across Africa. Most of the people in Africa are living in informal settlements, and they have no dignity. And we're now moving to where we're giving women housing not just as a house to sleep in, but making sure that her dignity is restored, she's respected, and our governments are taking it very seriously. Housing for Liberian?
Well, they differ from one country to another because legislative instruments differ from one country to another. So they are not all similar in cases. But there are similarities where, of course, the issue of financing, raising the money for the implementation of the projects becomes different. But then generally in terms of land ownership, we believe that countries are making progress so that investors can access land without going through the trouble of all the trouble that they're going through now. I mean, that's why in the Gambia we've created 3 stages. You have the customary ownership, which is recognized by the state. You have the freehold ownership, which is recognized by the state, and you have the leasehold ownership that's recognized by the state.
It was
an opportunity to present Morocco's experience in developing affordable housing and improving access to housing for the population. As I explained, Morocco has undergone very rapid urbanization over the past 60 years, with the urban population increasing 6-fold. This created major imbalances, including the spread of uninhabitable areas, informal settlements, and growing pressure on infrastructure and housing. To address these challenges, Morocco adopted an integrated approach under the leadership of His Majesty King Mohammed VI to reduce the housing deficit, and it has achieved significant results. To give a few figures, the housing deficit, which stood at 1.2 million housing units at the beginning of the 2000s, has been reduced by 75% over the past 25 years. At the same time, informal settlements have been reduced by 80%. By 2030, ahead of the FIFA World Cup hosted by Morocco, Spain and Portugal, we aim to completely eradicate informal settlements. This progress has been achieved through the mobilization of public funds, the introduction of innovative and adapted financing systems, the involvement of the private sector, and support from banks to improve citizens' access to housing finance. I believe this forum provided an important opportunity to share Morocco's expertise with African countries, and we are ready to support our African partners in reducing their own housing deficits as well.
Today, our role as Kenya was to share our experience in what we are doing on affordable housing. I think our president is the global champion on adequate housing, and he is leading the way. So we are here just to speak to other member states to share our experience on adequate and affordable housing. And that is what we have done. What has Kenya done to be where it is right now? If you remember my closing statement, I said in Kenya, every place is a construction site because there's a need of 250,000 houses annually. How do we achieve that? Kenya has the legal framework that frames on how housing is implemented from the Constitution, from the National Housing Policy, and an Adequate and Affordable Housing Act. Kenya also has an Adequate and Affordable Housing Levy, where Kenyans make contributions so that the country just doesn't rely on the national budget, neither does it just rely on the borrowing. You know, borrowing has become a big issue, and many countries are moving away from external funding. So Kenya has mobilized its own funds from its own people to be able to drive the affordable housing agenda.
A panel focusing on Lachin and Kalbajar addressed rebuilding and long-term economic activity in the post-conflict regions. Panel leaders highlighted that the projects currently being implemented in Kalbajar are not only physical reconstruction efforts, but also aim to restore historical justice and ensure the return of displaced residents to their native lands. The panel stressed that large-scale projects in the region contribute to the development of the Karabakh and East Zangezur economic regions.
Post-conflict regions such as Lachin.
Assistant to the President of Azerbaijan, Hikmet Hajiev, said Baku aims to remain active on the international agenda and contribute to the global economy. He also addressed many issues such as Afghanistan, urban challenges, climate change, and the significance of the World Urban Forum.
At the global level, we see emergence of the new hotbeds of the conflicts, and new tensions are emerging, and also food crisis, energy crisis, and fertilizer crisis that's also linked with the food crisis as such. And all of the things are happening at the global level, and also in the immediate neighborhood of Azerbaijan. And in the south, American and Iranian tension continues to be the case, and we're also wishing that the escalation will be the case between the two countries. In the meantime, there are other hotbeds of the conflicts in our neighborhood. But in the midst of all of these tensions and difficulties and challenges, and Azerbaijan is trying to provide a platform for the international cooperation, dialogue and collaboration. I think that World Urban Forum is one of such a platform. We are trying to do our utmost best, but everybody is most welcome, and our guests, and we can talk to one another and have a dialogue, and really world needs such a dialogue and platform for discussion. I think that World Urban Forum, together with you and together with our interlocutors, certainly without their support we also couldn't achieve, but we are providing the platform for the international discussion, including the most pressing and acute problems at the international level. Azerbaijan tries to be part of the international agenda, and also by virtue of its capabilities to contribute to the positive global agenda. COP29 was one of them. It was a really big challenge for Azerbaijan because we had a limited time to ensure organizational and logistical elements for organizing the event. I think that we have succeeded, but more than that, substantial part of the COP29. Azerbaijan's COP was considered like a financial COP because international community, particularly global south and developing and also least developed countries and island and also landlocked countries were expecting new financing mechanisms. I think that Azerbaijan's COP29 provided that financing, and it was not only Azerbaijan, but together with the international community we worked work together and we produce results. That was the vision of Azerbaijan, to building the bridge between the different parts of the world, building the bridge between global south and global north as well. Because as you can see, Azerbaijan is also putting a lot of emphasis and support for galvanizing all the energy and resources of the global south countries. And we also consider ourselves as a global south. But bringing together global south, we are not seeking isolation. We are also seeking new bridges of cooperation and collaboration with the global north as well. And as a continuation of the same policy of building bridges and providing the platform for the cooperation and being part of the global positive agenda, Azerbaijan is also hosting the World Urban Forum, because as everybody sees, and in the discussions that we have also seen that urbanization is an opportunity, is a challenge for every country. And urbanization is at full swing goes in all countries. But in the meantime, we see billions of the people all around the world are without housing. And in the 2050, more people will live in the cities rather than some other places. But there will be additional pressure on the infrastructure of all our respective countries. We should start thinking and working on all of these issues now, not to wait for other opportunities. From all of these dimensions, as you can see, we have a consistency, and it's not just an event, and we would like to see real substance. I am also looking forward that as a result of the World Urban Forum, Baku Call for Action document will be adopted. It's like a consensus document. It's not just produced by the government, it's produced by the stakeholders, civil society institutions, professionals, academicians from all our respective countries, providing the platform, providing the document and basis of the reference for the whole international community. And assuredly, what I can add also that Azerbaijan will continue its endeavors to providing the platform for such an international activities and being the positive part of the global agenda. Thank you. Really, between Kenya and Azerbaijan, we indeed see a lot of potential for development of our bilateral cooperation at the political level, economic, trade, and including the people-to-people contacts level as well. We also commend all the work of the Kenyan government for the housing project. Is one of the unique and also massive and very successful housing project. I think that at the practical level, at the institutional level, Kenya and Azerbaijan may also conduct experience sharing exercises as well to learn from one another's experiences. And in the meantime, we have been privileged and indeed very much appreciate that His Excellency Mr. President visited Azerbaijan during the World Urban Forum. We should also be cognizant of the fact that Kenya is a host country for UN Habitat. Azerbaijan is per capita, per person, one of the leading tea drinking countries in the world. And Kenya is one of the leading tea producing countries. It's just one example how we can effectively cooperate. And also, I'm myself very much fond of the Kenyan blue tea. It's yet another miracle. We didn't know about that. But it's just one example, tea, how we can effectively contribute trade and economic relations between our countries. But more than that, we are looking at the energy cooperation and including the mutual investment and also tourism. Kenya is also one of the touristic destinations in the world and in Africa specifically. In the meantime, education. We also think that at the educational institutions of the two countries can also cooperate and providing the scholarship for our students. And all in all, really, we see as a bright future for the Kenya-Azerbaijan cooperation in all dimensions. Two countries are also discussing potential investment projects, and Azerbaijan is also a potential investor, and we may consider certain investment projects based on the interests of the two parties and for advancing our economic and business relations. Really, climate change, every country is suffering from the elements of the climate change, and in Baku, you see that on the very first day of the World Urban Forum, we also faced with the calamities of the climate change, and such a heavy rain with such an outflow of the water in the mid of May for Azerbaijan, for Baku, it was something unusual. And in a sense, we also consider that it's an indication of the elements of the climate change for our region. And it affects everybody, and it affects in the Latin American region and many other parts of the world. And climate change also, I agree with you, that provides a difficulty for the habitat projects as well and for housing projects as well.
Well, discussions held on the final day of the World Urban Forum focused on key challenges facing the cities of the future. The panels addressed Indigenous people's housing rights, land-related issues and the challenges they face in urban spaces, as well as rapid urbanisation and the integration of green technologies. Here's more.
We are coming to you from the final day of the 13th session of World Urban Forum. The event is wrapping up today, but the momentum hasn't slowed down, with experts tracking some of the most critical challenges facing our future cities. Today's closing sessions feature two completely different yet equally urgent panels. The first brought a sharp focus on social justice, highlighting the systematic barriers indigenous peoples face. Experts from around the globe shared first-hand experience of overcrowding, land grabbing, and the exclusion of indigenous identities from urban spaces. The consensus here was clear: securing the right to adequate housing requires an immediate, holistic approach combining legal protection with culturally appropriate urban design.
It's reality that we don't use the terminology of indigenous people, but diversity existed in Azerbaijan many centuries, and we have a better model, multiculturalism model, which has existed, which is functionable, and we are creating the equal possibilities for all communities living in Azerbaijan. We're respecting all heritage, all groups living in this country, be it churches, mosques, synagogues, and etc., and also all nations, all minorities living in Azerbaijan have the same rights of getting education in their own languages, getting publication in their own languages. We are respecting their cultures, their beliefs, and etc. So we shared our experiences, and we also offer, as a hosting country, that we need to work on new housing programs. We need to include indigenous communities for shaping these policies. During urban planning, we need to work together to include diversity, because cities is not just the physical places where we live, but it's also a cultural environment, places where the people should be respected. We need to include all communities.
The second panel session focused on rapid urbanization and green technology. Experts shared practical strategies on how to embed renewable energy, smart grids, and circular systems into a modern infrastructure. Two very different discussions today, but they share a single bottom line: the cities of tomorrow must protect both their people and the planet. That's all for now. This is Leyla Rahimli with Zohrab Shirinov for A News.
Women's access to safe housing was also under the spotlight today, with speakers warning that insecure homes can deepen poverty, exclusion and violence. Narchicek Jahangirli reports.
The 2-hour Women's Roundtable session focused on the challenges women face in accessing safe and adequate housing, especially in context of global housing and climate crisis. Speakers highlighted how unequal land rights, insecure housing tenure, discriminatory laws and limited access to basic services continue to affect women and girls around the world. Throughout two discussion panels, participants shared innovative housing practices and successful policy examples from different countries. Civil society representatives also spoke about the daily experiences, drawing attention to the realities faced by women living in unsafe or unstable housing conditions. United Nations Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed attended the event and delivered opening remarks. She stressed that access to adequate housing is closely linked to dignity, safety, health and inclusion, while warning about the serious impact of housing shortages on women. Speakers also addressed the connection between housing insecurity and gender-biased violence.
Conducting the event, we need to focus on capacitating women-led grassroots women's organizations so that they have better access to funding, and also for enhancing their own capacity, right, to advocate for the housing rights agenda, and also to improve the housing facilities, including water, sanitation, and other basic facilities in the communities.
You look at the problems that particularly women have when they are abused and they have to leave their homes. They have a multiplicity of issues. What are they going to do about their children? How are they going to be housed? How do they get the money to keep their children and their families together? How are they going to continue to make sure their children are educated? Now, all of those things, and how do they earn money for themselves to make sure they can feed their families? All of those things have to be taken into account.
Many noted that the lack of safe and affordable housing often forces women to remain in abusive situations or risk homelessness and poverty. Female-headed households were identified as being especially vulnerable due to economic exclusion and limited access to credit and housing policy processes. Building on the Beijing Plus 30 action agenda and the new urban agenda, the roundtable aimed to strengthen gender-responsive housing policies and support women's leadership in housing and land governance. Recommendations shared during the session will contribute to the WF 13 outcome document and future policy discussions. Narçiçek Cahangirli, Natik Mehmedov, A News.
Well, the 13th session of the World Urban Forum has concluded in Baku, bringing together tens of thousands of participants from around the world to discuss the future of cities and sustainable urban development. According to organisers, more than 57,000 people took part in the forum, with representatives from 176 countries attending meetings and policy discussions. Speaking at the closing ceremony, UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed thanked Azerbaijan for hosting the forum and praised what she described as the country's leadership and hospitality.
With predictions of the 2026 El Nino, every investment must be turned into long-term resilience and for preparedness. This requires robust insurance systems that protect livelihoods, strengthen infrastructure, and reduce vulnerability, ensuring that our communities are safeguarded against future disasters. Excellencies, there is no pathway to achieving the 2030 agenda without sustainable urbanization and adequate housing. Draw every great challenge of our time on a page, and housing is the point at which they all converge. Adequate housing requires clean water and sanitation, energy to cook a meal, or heat or light a room. It's about affordability, access, safety, security of tenure. Enable these and you secure health, education, poverty eradication, gender equality, climate resilience, and social inclusion. This week, we have spoken of housing as a development issue, a sustainable development issue, an economic issue, and fundamentally a human rights issue.
Distinguished Deputy Secretary General, distinguished Under-Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as we conclude the 13th session of the World Urban Forum, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to Madame Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United States, for honoring us with her presence today. We are equally grateful to all participants, partners, organizers, interpreters, technicians, service providers, and to our public, private, and civil society institutions. It is your collective spirit that has given this forum its true meaning, bringing inclusivity to life and turning dialogue into the shared action. Your commitment and collaboration have been the invisible strengths behind every moment of success we have witnessed here in Baku. Finally, I sincerely thank the people of Azerbaijan, whose openness and hospitality contributed greatly to the success of this forum and helped create an atmosphere of friendship, unity, and shared purpose throughout WUF 13.
WUF 13 brought together a record number of participants, 57,000 people from 176 countries here in Baku, including more than 3,000 joining online, have delivered a powerful and united message. We are at a decisive moment for the future of housing. We can no longer afford the luxury of inaction. The world must move from marginal progress to systemic transformation. Housing systems across the globe are under immense pressure, strained by inequality, speculation, weak governance, rapid urbanization, displacement, and the escalating impacts of the climate crisis. Housing markets are clearly failing to meet people's needs. Billions are being pushed into inadequate, unsafe, and unaffordable living conditions.
Well, joining me here at the forum is our Deputy Editor-in-Chief, Orkan and Marshall, all over for another year then.
Yeah, Katie, what a 5-6 day event we had here. What a massive congregation, and many important points have been discussed throughout these 5-6 days. Fundamentally, housing has been recognized here as a human right. Everybody, irrespective of his economic, social background, is perfectly entitled to adequate housing. That was one of the key takeaways from this particular World Urban Forum. And we know that around 3 or 3.4 billion people around the world do not have access to adequate housing. 1.1 billion of them live in informal settlements, and 300 million people actually within the homelessness bracket. So it's a massive problem for all the world, not just global south and global north. Interestingly enough, and this should be noted, although this particular World Urban Forum 13th edition will go down in the annals of history as a best attended, well attended, with 45, according to the latest information coming from the statement made by UN Habitat Chief, Madam Rosbach, around 50,000 people attended this particular forum, but 90% of them actually was from global south countries, basically Asia countries. So some people are saying that to what extent this could bring the world together. Well, housing as a crisis, as a fundamental problem, is most pronounced in that part of the world, but we know that developed world also have its own challenges. So I would, instead of seeing dichotomy, I would be in favor of seeing it as a global forum with the world coming together, and it's only too natural that people from that part of the world are most present. Number two factor here, I think that there was a particular emphasis on, instead of actually getting rid of all the slums, all the informal settlements, what we need to do, we need to rebuild some of them, refurbish them, renovate them, and build new ones. That was a second key factor. And also, as long as the practical implication of this particular forum is concerned, we are not here to come up with a legally binding treaty. Heads of state and government are here not to sign a treaty, but they are to produce a report. So outcomes of this particular forum will be taken into account. They will form a legacy, and they will be added to the report, which should be produced in July of this year when General Assembly convenes. So we are presently happening to be at the midpoint when it comes to that World Urban Forum agenda from 2013-2036, and we're really, instead of producing tangible outcomes today, we're laying the foundations for the future decision making. And probably last point would be that we're facing a housing crisis in such a way that we have never noticed it before, and it's a multidimensional problem. I mean, of course, you were also, like many other colleagues, were watching dear colleague Fred's documentary, ANU's original World Urban Forum documentary regarding Shaki. He relates to Shaki, and there, in that particular documentary, we're talking about this shabaki system, effectively interlocking wooden lattices coming together without any glue or nail, and forming a wider harmonious picture. And same applies to the housing crisis. If you want to sort this problem out, you need to think about transport, you need to think about climate-related matters. If you don't have that inclusive, climate-conscious, nature-oriented, forgive this sort of language terminology that I'm applying here, but this terminology really reflects the complexity of the problem. So basically, the crux of the matter is, if you want to sort this problem out, you need to think about a number of things, and only that sort of inclusive thinking could lead to potential outcome in the fullness of time.
Good to make that distinction there about binding agreements and the fact that this isn't the purpose of this forum. So what will we be taking from this into Mexico City next year?
Well, in 2 years' time, the next forum will be, of course, in Mexico. As I said earlier, housing as a human right is one fundamental point. As I mentioned earlier, the informal settlements, they need to be refurbished. And also, we are moving from the point of making sure everybody has a boat to making sure everybody is entitled and perfectly capable of residing in a breathable city. There was a communique adopted yesterday. It's called Baku Call to Action, Breathable Cities Communique. And we have to make sure people are entitled to quality life. And also another important moment, I'm sure in Mexico, in the city of Mexico, people will reflect upon that, Azerbaijan's own example. I mentioned a couple of times throughout these 5 days, but I think it's worthy of mentioning and reiteration. Azerbaijan faced housing crisis in the early 90s because territories were occupied, and now Azerbaijan is rebuilding, if to use President Aliyev's words, said during the opening remarks, Azerbaijan rebuilding, reviving and restoring in Karabakh. Azerbaijan is doing it on the basis of green technology, and when you are rebuilding or renovating something, and that what you're rebuilding has already been destroyed, the question here is that what are you going to restore, because it's no longer there. So when you have this interregnum, like physical interregnum, then you need to bear in mind what would have been the case had what was destroyed would not have been destroyed. And that's a very complicated mental, of course, thinking process. And when you do that, you take into account the heritage, so you need to preserve heritage. So also you have to bear in mind that what was destroyed would have, had it continued, it probably would have assumed a different shape to what was the case before. That means you need to think in a different way. And number three, of course, you have to ensure that those places that you're rebuilding are perfectly inhabitable. When you go to different parts of Karabakh, and of course, my dear colleague and common colleague Anastasia Lavrina moderated a panel on the deoccupied territories of Azerbaijan. So basically, green technology and also smart cities are two key linchpins of the renovation efforts there. And money is no object. This principle does not apply to anybody. All countries need to bear in mind that financial resources are limited. Therefore, you have to make sure that money is being used properly. And that's a third exigency that we have to bear in mind.
Really great insight there, Orkan. You've been here across the forum, so it's great to have your reflections on the final day. And that is all from us here at the World Urban Forum. That's all from Bakhtiar in the studio. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful rest of your evening.